Hello and welcome to Chess Lovers channel. My 15th selection of the book I regard as one of the chess books which has benefited me the most is the following one, The Art of the Middlegame, written by Paul Keres and Alexander Kotov. And this specific edition has been translated by Harry Golombek. However, this is not the book I have read. I have read this edition. It's a Swedish edition called Konsten att vinna i schack, The Art of Winning in Chess. And the difference between the Swedish edition and the English edition is that the chapter by Golombek is not included in this book. So, if you read this book, you will also have a chapter about planning in the middle game written by Golombek, which is absolutely fine. So, I will tell you now a little bit of each part, which consists of, there are 4 parts altogether. And the first part is written by Kotov, and I read this book around 1988 when I was 23 years old. And the name of that chapter is called Strategy and Tactics of Attack on the King. And it has been split in 3 parts or chapters. Attack on opposite castle positions, attack on the same castle positions, attack against the uncastled king. I would say that this chapter in the book written by Kotov is very useful to read as an introduction how to attack the king according to where it's located on the board, in the middle, on the right side, or on the left side, which is the most common in, let's say, 90% of the game. And I even had courses based on this chapter, which I think is very instructive. And I can also recommend the 3rd chapter, also written by Kotov, where he's discussing different pawn positions in the center. In my earlier recommendations, I have recommended Pawn Power in Chess by Hans Kmoch, and there he is focused on all kinds of pawn formations arising on the chessboard. And I have also recommended Ruben Fine's the basic ideas in the chess openings. And there, the pawn structure he's discussing are connected to specific openings. But here we are talking about pawn structures connected to the center. And there are 5 such basic positions. And the first one is the closed center, where the pawns are locked to the opponent's pawns. Then we have the open center, and then as there are no pawns in the center, piece play becomes very important. We have the mobile pawn center, where the pawns can expand forward, and the opponent has to try to block them. And the 4th is the fixed center. For example, in the half-open game, this position can arise, so it will not change in the near future. And the last pawn position is the opposite to fixed pawn center, dynamic center. And all these different pawn structures in the center gives you information how you should proceed, because there are different techniques depending on the specific pawn center. And then I would say that Kotov makes a very good job writing about these 5 basic pawn structures. I have also discussed this chapter when I had courses. According to John Nunn, he has written this excellent book, Secrets of Practical Chess. He recommends this book, but he emphasizes the chapters by Keres, and I can understand that because Keres chapters are on much higher level, and it's especially the chapter called How to Defend Difficult Positions, which I recommend here, and I have studied it very carefully, because he's not discussing defense in general terms. There are other books where they are discussing how to defend, more comprehensive books. So Keres has a much more limited perspective on the defense because it's only discussing extremely difficult positions. For example, he penetrates a position which arose between Janowski and Bernstein, the first round in St. Petersburg, 1914, where White had a very exposed king, and he eventually lost the game because of that. But Keres showed that White could keep the draw by striving to exchange the queens. We were dealing with only major pieces, queen and 2 rooks versus queen and 2 rooks, and try to reach a rook ending where White would have been a pawn down. So this is something you can say in general terms, that if your king is exposed, try to exchange queens, and if you're pawn down, you have the biggest chance to save the game in a rook ending. He also discusses the famous game between Rubinstein and Capablanca, the famous queen ending in the same tournament, St. Petersburg 1914. And in that game, Capablanca managed to hold the draw despite the fact he was a pawn down. So there are many such examples also from the Soviet chess championships. And then there is a last chapter, which is also very important. I would not say it less important nowadays. It's the art of analysis. And today we don't have adjourned games, but in the days when I was a professional chess player, for example, I played in Swedish championships or in Gaustal in the end of the 80s and in the early 90s. You often got adjourned games, and they were adjourned after, well, if it were not 4 hours, it would have been 6 hours. Capablanca he did not like adjourned games, so he was one of the great players who suggested that you should start the game a little bit earlier in the day, and after, I don't know how many hours, but let's say after 4, 5, or maybe 6 hours, you could have a lunch, you could have a break for food, and then play the game, continue, and finish the game. So the game would be interrupted, but only for food. And this is an interesting suggestion, but I don't know any case where this occurred. But today we have this situation that because the games have been much shorter, we do not have any more adjournments. And this is both good and bad. It's good because some people could benefit from these adjournments by asking much stronger players. So if I got an adjourned game in Gausdal, I would mainly depend on myself, and perhaps if you had a friend with you, you could analyze with that person. But some other players could benefit from this because they were stronger, and maybe they had players who also were very strong players. So there could be some unfair in these situations. So I can understand the drawbacks with these adjournments. And of course, a general drawback is that you never get time to rest and prepare for the next game, and you play longer hours. I remember in Gausdal when I played the Czech Grandmaster Vlastimir Jansa, we had a very interesting endgame. I think it lasted for more than 90 moves. And if I remember it correctly, it was adjourned 2 times. And I believe that after the tournament, or maybe in the middle of the tournament, Jansa said that this adjournment took a lot of energy from Jansa, and then it was more difficult for him to win games. And some players get more adjournments than other players because of their playing style, especially if you like endings. So of course there are some drawbacks in that way, but some benefits playing adjournments is that you learn very much about endings, because you have to do very deep analysis. And Ulf Andersson is one of the players who has always said that he has learned so much from playing these adjournments, and I think the same goes for John Timman. So there are both good and bad that we do not have adjournments anymore, but still, to be able to analyze a position deeply is one, if not the most important asset in chess. I think it was Botvinnik who said that. So you would get a very good general foundation if you read these 4 chapters, and you can also read about planning by Golombek. So you have 5 chapters discussing different aspects of the middle game. So as I said before, I have only read the Swedish edition. This was actually the first book I came in contact with. It's a little bit strange, the Swedish edition of The Art of the Middle Game, because my father had it in his bookshelf. I think I was maybe only 10 years old when I understood that he had a chess book in his shelf, but I only knew how to move the pieces. So this book was always regarded as too difficult for me. It was only when I advanced and became a very good club player that I understood that this was a very beneficial book. So I recommend it both in English and Swedish, because then you will have a very good foundation of how to attack the king in different locations, how to play with 5 basic pawn structures in the center. You will also increase your ability and awareness that you can save extremely difficult positions by reading what Keres has written about this. And the last chapter will also benefit you, obviously, about how to analyze a position very deeply. I hope you have enjoyed my clip now, and if you don't have this book, that you try to get it, because you will never regret it. And I hope to see you when I talk about my 16th selection of what I believe are the best chess books that has ever been written. Thanks for now, and see you then. Thanks for watching.